Hi there, and welcome to another one of my classic series, where I pick one of my favourite movies, give it a rewatch, and then review it. And this episode I'm going for a film from one of my all-time favourite directors, Ingmar Bergman, and I'm going for Shame, which is one of his kind of lesser-known masterpieces. Like, I think this is one of his films that everyone kind of agrees is a really good Bergman movie, but it's not one that's talked about that much. And Shame is actually one of my favourite Bergman movies, and I think it's utterly brilliant. So, it was made in 1968, just 2 years after Bergman made the incomparable Persona, which is one of the finest films ever made. And Shame sort of is the middle film in an informal trilogy that Bergman made from 68 till 69, which basically followed different couples played by Liv Ullmann and Max von Sydow, and how violence disrupts their lives. So, Shame is kind of different to Bergman's usual work. It is only a film set in the future, and it's a war movie, and Bergman didn't traditionally make many war movies. But this being Bergman, he doesn't actually seem to really care about war as war. His film is more about internal struggle. In fact, it's not the external war that really matters to him. The sides in Shame are indistinguishable. The political opinions of the characters and of the world is never established. War is kind of abstract. This is a purely abstract game for Bergman to explore characters. The characters have internal struggles, which in and of themselves become kind of wars. I mean, Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann both play artists. And a part of this film is perhaps the futility of art, like these characters realise that art has served them no purpose as war rages around them. What war does, in Bergman's mind it seems, is war makes everybody unfaithful. It makes people unfaithful to their principles, to their morals, to each other. The lead couple of Shame slowly have their relationship deteriorate as war rages on. In fact, I think part of war in Bergman's mind is that it brings forth all the contradictions that we have. The characters in Shame both simultaneously love each other and hate themselves. They love themselves so much that they wouldn't want to fight, but then that makes them ashamed of being cowardly, and that makes them hate themselves. So it's an internal struggle. In fact, the characters have both happy and sad moments, and as time goes on, their morals sort of deviate. They end up doing things they wouldn't have considered doing at the start of the film. They start off the film quite shut off. They have no communication. They can't escape their insular life. They're very much cut off from the world, but the world and the war wants to get involved in their lives. And as the world and the war gets involved in their lives, they find themselves unable to cope with it, and then it promptly abandons them, and they're left in this heartless world where everything sort of is rotten and they can't do anything. There's a lot of interesting ideas that Bergman sort of brings up. It has Bergman's usual brilliantly made style. I love his quiet moments. I love the way that he uses close-up. I love the way that he uses character. Sven Nykvist, Bergman's most famous collaborator as a cinematographer, is at his best here. This is one of Sven Nykvist's best work. Because it's a war movie, it's a lot bigger in scale than most of Bergman's films. And so the camera work is more dynamic and more expressive, and it's more moving. It moves around a lot more, and there are a lot of wider frames here. Of course, that doesn't mean it doesn't have Bergman's usual intimacy. It has lots of close-ups. It has loads of moments which are beautiful. There's a surprising amount of close-ups of Liv Ullmann, which is something that I greatly appreciate. I think Liv Ullmann is a fascinating screen presence. Liv Ullmann's character has a couple of things that are kind of remnants of Persona. In fact, there's a couple of things to do with motherhood and about a woman wanting a child, which then are kind of shown to be, well, you can't really have a child in wartime, so you can only have a child during peace. But the thing that really destroys the characters in a way is that they realise peace will never happen, and so they end up totally dejected. I think watching Liv Ullmann's character go from being the strongest character in the film at the beginning to being utterly weakened by the end is kind of devastating. It's certainly a film which shows war just grinding people down and bringing out all of their conflicts. In fact, the war makes people more truthful. When people are truthful, they're callous, and callousness itself deteriorates the relationships. In fact, I think the key thing about Shame is about a central relationship. It's not about war in and of itself. It's about how a relationship struggles, and it's about how that struggle manifests itself as people start to do questionable things morally, or questionable things in terms of relationships. I think both characters have their flaws, and I think that's part of what makes it interesting. These are flawed characters who in peacetime might have got on, but they live in a time of war. War is ultimately destroying on an internal level. War destroys your soul. Their relationship doesn't fall apart because war happens. Their relationship falls apart because the characters lose themselves, and they lose themselves because of war. War makes them not realise who they truly are anymore, and so it just destroys them. Shame has a lot of Bergman's more abstract and allegorical ideas. It's not Bergman that is most abstract, but it's very much a grounded story of war told in a totally fictitious world. I mean, Bergman has kind of touched on things like this before. Winter Light kind of has a thread about Chinese nuclear war being a possibility. So there's certainly little aspects here and there that Bergman has touched on before. But Shame is ultimately one of Bergman's most original works. It's distinctive among his filmography because it's his only sort of futuristic war movie, although I hesitate to say futuristic. It feels very much like the same setting as Bergman's other films. It's just technically set in the future. It has a lot of Bergman's typical tendencies, but the few things that are atypical are kind of what makes it distinctive. I think Shame is about as strong a work as you were going to get from the Swedish author, and I think Shame is one of Bergman's finest works. It's an utter masterpiece. I think it's really made at the peak of Bergman's career, just after Hour of the Wolf and just before The Passion of Anna, but which are two other very fine works by Bergman. I think this is kind of the strongest Bergman ever really got, was the late 60s. I just adore Shame. I think Shame is brilliant. I think this is one of the best war movies ever made, and I think one of the best war movies because it isn't actually about a specific war. It's not about history. It's about just an abstract concept. It's about war on a purely mental level. It's about the war inside us. It's not about the external war as much as that is what the story is technically about. I think Shame is masterful. I think it's one of Bergman's finest works, and I absolutely adore it. So that's what I think of Shame, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it, so leave me a comment if you have any opinions on it. If you like this video, give me a like. If you want to subscribe, then go ahead, because I post reviews quite often. If you want to keep up with what films I'm watching, you can follow me on Twitter or Letterboxd, links in the description, and thank you for watching.